Welcome to the Noble Ape Podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today I wanted to talk about a wide variety of things that relate to really the communication associated with Noble Ape, and to a lesser extent also biota.org. I'm talking specifically here about Facebook, and how Facebook is being utilised in terms of communicating, or at least strengthening and getting a clearer sense of the artificial life community, or at least the 10 to 20% that participate in Facebook. And for me, Facebook falls into something that I am now referring to as Zeroth life, to pay homage to Second Life. But Zeroth life is life prior to my current life. And Facebook has been very useful in terms of reconnecting me with people that I knew in Australia, and I knew a lot of people in Australia, and to a lesser extent people I knew in the Bay Area, and to almost no extent at all people I knew in the UK, although a few of the folks on my Facebook friends group are people I knew in the UK. And this phenomenon of Zeroth life is quite topical currently because I'm planning on returning to Australia for a brief holiday next year, and I want to take the digital recorder I'm recording into currently in order to talk to folk who were relatively central to the early stages of the Noble Ape development. Now, with the locations that I'm looking to go to, that may be rather difficult. I think I may eliminate Canberra, Australia as a location to visit, as both my parents now live in Sydney, and just travel to Sydney and Adelaide. There are half a dozen people in both Sydney and Adelaide that have primary connections to the Noble Ape development, so all is not lost in that regard. However, it does eliminate a few people in Canberra, and also it eliminates the potential of doing some video footage as well, which I'd also thought about doing. But then again, it's still relatively fluid currently, and I may return to Canberra. What it will give me an opportunity to do is actually create a slightly more coherent history associated with the early period of the Noble Ape development, and this in part relates to talking to people whose memories may be relatively hazy or just forgotten the related interlinking. One of the interesting things with regards to spending an evening with Doug Rushkoff is he has a near photographic memory of the period that I knew him, so he was able to provide me with a lot of names and remind me of various interconnections that I had forgotten, call it a repressed memory or what have you. So what interests me with regards to Facebook is the ability not only to keep in contact with folks that I have known in the past, but also folks who are a part of the artificial life community, and also folks who listen to Ape Reality and who are interested in Noble Ape. And this is an interesting process because, for example, people like Pedro and Riddle, who I've worked with extensively over the past 4 years, I've not actually met them. And this folds into the issues associated with quality of life as well, because the quality of life issues that affect artificial life developers have also affected me through the connection with software engineering that I mentioned in the Biota Live on the quality of life issues. So the way in which I utilise Facebook seems to have moved from initially keeping in contact with people that I actually knew to keeping in contact with people who I may meet in the future, to keeping in contact with users, potentially interested parties, folks who were connected with the biota community in Gratham. And this has expanded my Facebook group into something which is really quite surreal. I think probably only a small percentage, maybe in the order of 15% of my friends on Facebook are people that I actually know. What does it tell me about Noble Ape users? Well, this is information that I'm still collating. However, the master's level education seems to be relatively central. It's also quite interesting where they're geographically located. I think Facebook has permeated better in the US and Australia and the UK, so I think there's going to be a necessary weighting with regards to these regions. It's identifying a number of users and a number of areas that I've never initially known about. That is an advantage because you can have initial interactions. If you are listening to this podcast and you are on Facebook and you have not yet befriended me, please befriend me. And similarly, if you have befriended me, please provide me feedback. Now, this works into something even more interesting. The problem with regards to these social networks, Facebook specifically, is it takes a large amount of time in order to keep updating and up to date. And similar to the Biota podcast, for example, it has been a free time vacuum. There are definite needs associated with the Noble Ape development currently, which I'm going to cover in future podcasts. But the interaction with Facebook has been something which I've found both extremely nurturing, but also it lacks the contact and communication that one would get with sitting down with a friend. There's all these artificial interactions which I'm finding quite surreal through Facebook. It is just another distancing technology. Similar experience, but in no way related to artificial life specifically. My experience with regards to Google Street View in the area that I lived in Australia, and ability to walk around a contemporary Australia in an environment which is passive, which has no additional interaction, is somewhat surreal too. I feel these experiences are analogous in my own mind with regards to the Facebook Facebook interaction, the Google Street View interaction, in terms of not really being able to gel quite the same level that one would have with a sit-down discussion or even a telephone call. And Biota Live is filling some of that void too. But I think this need for socialisation is something which is really a recent phenomenon. And if I look back on the history of the Noble Ape development up until when Dave Kerr got in contact with me, I had no real sense of an outside world in terms of kindred artificial life developers. Certainly I had some sense of an outside world in terms of users. I just didn't have this strange intimacy of distancing which I get with Facebook in particular. So I don't know really where I am in this, particularly with regards to befriending not only people I knew, people connected with things like Greythumb, people I've interacted with, but now also the extended user groups associated with Noble Ape and Biota.org. It's certainly been very useful initially in cultivating potential Greythumb locations. However, the chance of a Greythumb Las Vegas is as likely as it's ever been, which is fundamentally unlikely. And it's one of these curious things that these events go on, for example, in the Bay Area or potentially in the future in Los Angeles or Boston, these areas. But really my interaction with them is all some degree secondary. It is very much the Google Street View analogous interaction. What does this mean into the future? I don't know whether my location is going to change in the near future. What I will hope to do, particularly with regards to if the Australia trip comes together, which I think it probably will, is take as much audio and potentially some video and get as much of that into the Noble Ape related dialogue. Now, as I've noted, people's recollections may change, but also people have lost contact with regards to what Noble Ape is currently. And I think that interaction with me talking about it and explaining it in the context of them recounting stories and me recounting stories may actually be productive too. It'll all happen in the future. It's an interesting time. And if you do correspond with me on Facebook, please put provocative ideas out there. Put topics for future podcasts. This is something I've talked about up until now, and it's something I strongly believe in. I think the folks that are listening to this podcast are probably best suited to suggest future topics, although I have half a dozen I'd like to talk about. Anyway, I'm going to talk about what I'm doing currently in future podcasts. I just wanted to put this one out there with regards to Facebook, social networks, and the evolution of my thoughts with regards to them, as this fends in some regard into artificial life community related stuff. Tom@nobleape.com if you have any questions, comments, you're not on Facebook, you'd like to raise issues, these kind of things. Thank you for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.